never felt more at home with the group of friends and people that I have. The medicine of friendship, like Anam Cara means soul friend. And basically it's this friendship that is so deep, that it transcends space and time. It is the ultimate mirror, and it's the type of friendship that is really a medicine. Like it's like a psychedelic of its own.
Welcome to Psychedelic Source, where wisdom meets practice in the evolving landscape of psychedelic medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Sandra Dreisbach, and I'm here to help you navigate the complex intersection of ethics, business, and personal growth in the psychedelic space. Whether you're a practitioner, therapist, entrepreneur, or simply curious about this transformative field, you've found your source for authentic dialogue, practical resources, and community connection. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the stories, strategies, and ethical considerations that matter most to our growing ecosystem. Let's tap in to our inner source of wisdom and explore what it means to build a sustainable and ethical psychedelic future together.
The information shared on this podcast, our website, and other platforms may be triggering for some viewers and readers and is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional medical, legal, or therapeutic advice. While we explore topics related to altered states of consciousness, we do not endorse or encourage illegal activities or substance use. Always research your local laws and consult qualified professionals for guidance. The content provided is, as is, and we are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared. Stay supported and informed, act responsibly, and enjoy the podcast.
In this episode of Psychedelic Source, I have the opportunity to talk with Dr. Lani Roy. And I want to give you a heads up right now that this episode may be potentially more triggering than others because of the content. So I just want to make sure you're taking care of you. That said, I know you'll enjoy the journey of the conversation with Dr. Lani Roy. She is a psychologist, a social worker, a psychedelic therapist, and she's also the founder and chair of AMAPP, the Australian Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Practitioners. She has worked with borderline personality and dissociative identity disorder in various roles in the community, everything from rape crisis centers with victims of sexual abuse, childhood and adult sexual abuse supporting women in the industry, and survivors of even human trafficking. And so she is indeed a specialist in complex trauma. And she shares very candidly about her own experiences, not in detail, but how her own healing journey led her to this work and why she cares so very much about creating good ethical practice in her work and how she tries to develop accountability and good guidelines in support of her practice. So while we're all evolving and learning how to support everyone, I think this one is unique in the fact that we're seeing how this sort of healing transformation promises that we talk about in psychedelic practice, how that can possibly show up. So enjoy the episode. Take care of you during this episode. Well, hello, Dr. Lani. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so grateful to have you here. We know each other from AMAP, but we've met each other before that. But maybe you could tell our listeners a little bit about you and your work from your perspective.
Awesome. Excited to be here. So I guess today I'm just me and my many lenses that I work with. So I'm the director of the Science of Life Psychology, which is a private practice, and also the director of Anam Cara Center for Psychedelics and Contemplative Therapies with my beautiful best friend and business partner, Melissa Warner, and the chair of AMAP, which is the Australian peak body for multidisciplinary psychedelic practitioners that has launched about a year and a half ago now. So, yeah, they're my main projects at the moment.
I can't believe it's already been a year and a half. It feels like just yesterday. I mean, and maybe you could tell, maybe
not for me.
you've already done a lot of heart labor in so many ways, and I think I would definitely say that about you. You definitely put all of who you are in your work, and that's at least my experience of you, and that it really is a passion. And maybe we should talk a little bit about what brought you into this work. How did you come into relationship with plant medicines or psychedelics, or what's your coming to the space and community? What was the heart that got it started?
Yeah, I love that question, and I'll never get sick of answering it, because I think each time you do, you find little jewels and other meaning reference points that evolve over time as well. And that just shows you the relational element of medicine work. It doesn't just stop at one point; it just keeps growing. But for me, I'm a social worker and psychologist, and have been for since I was in my early 20s, and have been a sexual abuse therapist as my main passion daily, working with complex trauma and childhood abuse. And that comes from my own lived experiences of trauma. And I reached a point around when I turned 30, where I went through like a really profound dark night of the soul. My existential framework for reality just was not holding up with the level of suffering and at times evil, that I was coming into contact with the children and people that I was supporting. And yeah, I went through a 2-year period of, really intense searching, just, it wasn't manic or psychotic, but it was just below that, right at that cusp of, not sleeping and just searching for any literature, any, I guess, author, theory, religion, just deep, 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 deep searching and trying lots of different modalities as well for myself. And yeah, and just finding that my own client work had reached a point where it's like, this is not enough. There's something I'm missing in my practice. And, a whole series of events led me to go to the jungle by myself at a point in Australia where I didn't know anyone else that had done psychedelics. So some reason that just wasn't there in my field. There wasn't that professional landscape that there is now. The boom hadn't started. So it was quite an isolating, scary experience. Most people told me not to do it, including my psychologist, incredible woman who's since passed away, and she had the best intentions. But she said, don't go, and if I'd actually listened to her, I'm not sure where I'd be, because it was getting pretty dangerous in the sense of just not sleeping, really that self-care started to really plummet. And, I had 2 young children at the time. But yeah, as soon as I had that experience with the medicine, it completely did. That one session did completely change my life. And that sounds like a bit of a cliche, but it was really, a huge turning point for me, and opened up the mystery and opened up so much depth, and, didn't give me many answers, but it activated a deep love of life and death, and my relationship with suffering and pain is completely transformed now. It's more alchemical and relational. And yeah, then I came back to Australia, and then very quickly, started carving out a career and bringing these medicines to Australia, and with many, many other pioneers, and changing how I work with people as well.
That's beautiful, and also really powerful, because I think women are really brave, but at the same time, to leave your country of origin against the advice of your therapist, and I'm not saying this is the right choice for everyone, right? Always listen to your medical professionals and therapeutic advice, and take it under consideration, right? Which I'm sure you did as a professional yourself. But to go to, I'm guessing South America is where you went, or
Yeah.
yeah, and I assume you hadn't been there before.
No, I traveled the world extensively, even by myself, and I've been to some pretty exotic, challenging places, but I had always been well when I'd gone. So I guess you're right. The unique quality was I was very unwell and I went by myself. And I completely agree. People do need to listen to their mental health professional. But I guess the difference was with my one, she didn't have any understanding of the medicines and she was coming from a place of fear.
Right.
So and I get it because that's where we were in the culture at the time, but it didn't help me because when I accessed her knowledge, it was like very limited. Whereas, I think as practitioners now, when we're doing risk assessments with people, when we can come from a place of, okay, what are your options? What is the risk? And if the client can feel really safe and held without fear to explore that, I think, I think that makes the difference because unfortunately at that time, when that information was given to me, I just was like, she doesn't know what's going on here.
She doesn't understand.
She doesn't
she can't.
understand. Yeah.
She's not coming from an informed place,
No, at no fault
and
at all of hers.
no,
It was just
no,
the
right. I
context. Yeah.
imagine, she was very talented and,
Mhm.
but what would you tell professionals now, who don't know about this work, whether in Australia or beyond, who may have that fear like your therapist have, especially as a professional yourself? What would you tell them?
I would tell them in Australia and really around the world, it's a obligation to know about these medicines because it is in the field. It is a healthcare choice, an option. It's real. It's becoming more and more available, and not knowing as a practitioner is actually, I think, it's potentially it's unethical because in Australia now it's so available in the media, it's so available in the literature. If you're choosing not to know, then as a practitioner, you're turning your eyes away from evolving science and from a big chunk of healthcare narrative. You can say it's not your specialty, but I think there needs to be a base awareness of this is the data, these are the risks, these are the potential benefits, so that if someone comes into you, you can at least know where to refer them to, and you can do so from a place of like respect and harm reduction, and not from fear, but from just informed healthcare.
Yeah, no, I just want to reinforce what you're just saying, that I think that's a really grounded approach, right? Like, you don't have to be in favor of psychedelic therapy. You don't have to, get trainings to be a psychedelic therapist, right? But you can be open-minded and be educated and informed for the benefit of your work and for your clients as a professional.
Exactly. And I would also say to them that, there's risks with everything. There's a lot of risks with pharmaceutical side of treatment. There's risks in everyday therapy. There's a risk just being a human being in this world, waking up every day.
Absolutely.
And that, you need to treat these medicines like any other, tool that there's risk and there's benefits, and just helping people to navigate that clearly.
Yeah, because part of what helps mitigate those risks is being informed and understanding, and you can reduce those risks. But the other piece that made me curious when you brought up your personal story, not just from being a professional who has awareness, a deep awareness of sexual abuse and trauma, from both a personal and a professional perspective, and us now, at least from your, I'm sure, very informed lens now, knowing that harms do occur in the space, to be a single woman and go abroad, there might be independent reasons why someone may say, why would you go travel abroad and risk, right, the potential harms, knowing that even if it is a good therapy, that there are additional risks to you as a woman. But what would you say to someone now in our current environment about that?
Yeah, it's really interesting because when I went to the jungle, it wasn't to heal my sexual trauma or the domestic violence that I experienced that actually had felt really healed. I'd done a lot of work, even though it's, there's always ongoing elements, but that wasn't why I went to the jungle. The why was, ultimately facing death and the bigger, much larger existential themes. But I did have an interesting experience on my first first ceremony, which was the most profound I've ever had, and I've had hundreds since, but there will be nothing that will replicate that one experience. There was a girl next to me who was sober and didn't have any medicine that night. And there was an experience in the journey when I was obviously having a very difficult time, and energetically the curanderos came over and put some agua de florida on my belly. So they lifted up my top just a little bit and put the agua de florida that smells beautiful on my belly. But in that moment, I had no idea what was happening. I thought that I was being assaulted, and, because there was people touching me on my belly. And as soon as, that was only one little fragment of my journey. There was, a million other lenses to it. But as soon as the lights went on and I looked at the curanderos, I just felt safe, and I was like, okay, I need to check in what's happened here. And I was lucky. I was able to turn next to me to the girl and say what happened. And she said that, exactly that. And that landed for me, and that felt accurate. But I often think to myself, what if she wasn't sober? And also, I didn't even know that they did that before I went into the jungle. I didn't know that they could lift up your top and put oil, oil on you without you giving consent, technically, because you can't. In that state, I couldn't give consent. I couldn't even hear them.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to emphasize. Like, anyone in an altered state of consciousness cannot give proper informed consent. And you were in that state when this experience happened, and it is part of that tradition. But in terms of, it sounds like from part of your preparation for that experience, it wasn't like they talked about these are the sort of things we might do in ceremony.
No, these are the tools. These are the things that can happen. You at least consent to that beforehand. So I didn't have that. They missed that. It was quite an amazing center, to be honest, but also very rustic and very, very shamanic in the sense of there's things going on there that they're just doing, probably assuming consent. And this is where it gets a bit tricky. So I guess a big part of my work is for people to really do an assessment on, what do they know about the context? What are the tools that they use? What is their sensory profile? For some people, they hate being touched. They hate certain music. If they've got, sensory challenges, really having as much information as you can. But I guess ultimately, I wasn't thinking about any of that. I was thinking about surrendering, like completely obliteration, to be honest. So again, that articulates when people are in those states, they're not thinking about these other things. It's life or death for some people. And this is where the practitioner, if you can, like slowing down some of this urgency, or at least having that, that time to go, okay, so for you to surrender and for you to have that experience and come back from it, there's probably some pretty important things you need to consider.
And I love that you brought up the idea of having like sort of a sensory intake or checklist. I've been talking with some people actually in the neurodiversity space about, we've been working together on a checklist that could help with that sort of sensory aspect. And it sounds like you've integrated it as part of, your work in informing people. And even though it sounds like overall that experience was really positive, that experience still helped inform your work. How would you describe your work currently?
Oh, dynamic. I appear to learn. I learn everything the hard way.
Oh, please, no, let's manifest that.
But I make very strong medicine from it, and it does help me to definitely support others. Because, I guess once I returned from the jungle and I felt fantastic, I felt really incredible. Then I entered the next dark night of the soul, which was the professional dark night of the soul, which was my baptism of fire into the field of corporate psychedelics, the field of narcissism. There was a whole layer of vulnerability that I had no idea existed, because I had decades of really easy and healthy working relationships, largely. Like, I use my husband as the metrics because we've been together since I was 17. And I'm like, was it always like this? Was it always, hard? Like, because it is hard at times. And he said, no, there's something distinct and unique about the field of psychedelics. And I guess how I've managed to kind of make meaning of it recently is it's unique in the sense that you've got, well, a new culture emerging with not a lot of elders. If we're not talking about the, shamanic, First Nations context, we're talking more about the Western surge of psychedelics. So you've got experts that are deeply in process themselves. So they've got large research portfolios, they've got huge pressure, they've got incredible pioneering work. They're doing their own medicine work and their own traumas coming up. And then you've got, that lack of eldership, and you've got, spiritual emergence, spiritual bypassing, capitalism, narcissism, mass media, and it just goes on and on and on. And it's a lot.
Well,
So,
and before you say more, maybe we should position you a little bit. Maybe you could say a little bit about, where are you from, and where do you live currently, and how do you identify?
I love that. Wow, in my data recently, people have been talking about global citizen, and I very much, when they started saying that, I was like, oh my God, that's incredible. Like, citizen of, the globe. But yeah, born in Belfast, but migrated to Australia when I was really young. So very much Australian. But I have, strong connection to, I've got family in America, family in South Africa, family in Scotland and Ireland. And yeah, and I love travel. And I also very, very connected to Peru and the curanderos that I work with there. So yeah, all those things and more.
And what about now? What about what in Australia, right? What would you say are your primary relationships there?
Mm. Yeah, I would say in my primary relationships have come from the medicine community that I've discovered in the last 6 years. I've never felt more at home with the group of friends and people that I have, the more the medicine of friendship, like being able to, you think you know what friendship is at a certain point in life, and then it has just grown and deepened. And I guess that brings me to mentioning the name Anam Cara, which is a Celtic word that me and Melissa have named our centre and psychedelic training centre after. And Anam Cara means soul friend, and it's a John O'Donoghue writes this amazing poetry and book about it, and basically it's this friendship that is so deep, that it transcends space and time. It is the ultimate mirror. It's not easy, but the depth of love is endless. And it's a type of friendship that is really a medicine. Like, it's like a psychedelic of its own. And I'm just very lucky I had that with my Melissa, who's my business partner, but also many other friends. I've got this, and you can have Anam Cara and you can be Anam Cara to someone else. And it's a very profound relationship. So yeah, that's what I'm exploring with at the moment in many ways.
That's really beautiful. That's deeply beautiful, and especially as someone with my own Scottish ancestry and Celtic ancestry, I appreciate hearing that in connection and relationship too. So it's beautiful. But maybe you want to tell us a little bit about what Anam Cara is doing in terms of training. How are you approaching that work with that soul friend, heart space intention?
We're about to launch our new website and all our new offerings in the next month or so. So it's been a big journey in the sense of, I guess, evolving as a practitioner and really finding myself and like who I can work with and who I can't work with. And yeah, just the more this work is so delicate, and you really need to, the relationships and the container, of this work. I'm still learning so much about, in order for me to deliver the best programs, like the environment that I've got to cultivate for me and my team, and the conditions that we got to nurture for this to be rolled out in a way that's sustainable and healthy. And yeah, so that's a whole big piece. But I guess what the metaphor of Anam Cara is that ideally, that if you are a psychedelic therapist, you have someone in your life that is an Anam Cara. You have a soul friend. You have the support, the love, someone who can hold up the shadow without shame, without, abandonment and ridicule, like just that depth of friendship. I found at this time in this field, it can be quite isolating, and harmful. Friendships can go through a lot. Professional relationships can go through a lot. I really feel we need like close friendships to get through it. And we're not giving Anam Cara to our clients. It's different because there's a different relationship there. But the goal is that the clients that we work with who've had severe trauma, severe relational damage, abuse, that at some point in their life they know what it's like to have Anam Cara, to be able to love themselves that much, and be in relationships so deeply with someone else. And so that's the kind of the alchemy of it. And then we have also, we can put this in the show notes, but swim is our metaphor for, I guess psychedelics is this vast ocean of experiences. And in order to weather the storms and to return to shore, we need to know how to swim, and we need a whole range of tools. So our program is designed around the somatic lenses, interdependence, the field of interdependence, wisdom. So wisdom is the aspiration from, I guess, more of the Buddhist lens, the aspiration of wisdom, of what it means to be, embodied ethics, right relationship, compassion, different philosophies, wisdom traditions that we draw upon, because a lot of people have a lot of knowledge in this field, but wisdom is something that we need to aspire to. And with that, mentors, elders, wisdom traditions, and that's the whole big piece. Interdependence. So this is the field that we're all swimming in. We're dropped into this profound mystery. Most of us feel disconnected throughout our life. So this covers many different things, from nature-based therapies, from even parts work in the sense of understanding who we're relating with and how we're relating, and tools and practices through meditation and metacognition and somatics as well.
What's the
Metacognition.
Metacognition. Okay, metacognition.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by metacognition?
So it is the capacity to know your mind and hold your mind within other people's mind, and also within the universal mind. So I guess what we know is that when people have severe mental illness or trauma, their metacognition is impacted. So they can become very eye-focused, survival. Compassion can be very hard, into dependence, into connection. You lose touch of that. Your body is foreign or scary. So it's helping people to really break down those tools of critical thinking, reflection, discernment, being able to step into someone else's mind with compassion and hold pretty tough things, be able to see the other in self. And I guess from a harm reduction perspective, it's discernment, so that when people go into like really complex altered states of consciousness, they're not necessarily assuming it's fact or real or literal, or that they are God. And well, we all are, but from that place of the chosen one, grandiose, these tools can really help people go, okay, that's an interesting thought. How does that feel in my body? How does that really play out in my relationships? What's the impact of that? Maybe I need to pause before acting that out. So it's a whole range of practical skills to scaffold the psychedelic mind, so that people can journey really far and wide and not take it so seriously and play with phenomena. And also, I guess it links back into the somatics, into interdependence and into wisdom, and it kind of all comes together so you don't drown.
So you swim. Right. Are there lifeguards on duty?
That interdependence, that's the community, that's the field. Yeah.
The community is part of that interdependence. Yeah, I'm kind of curious to explore that more, but maybe you could tell me, like, so if I'm someone who is a new a client, or someone who is wanting to learn about the swim. Oh, I guess this is for facilitators, right? For people who are wanting
Yes,
to
yeah,
support and work with people. So you're teaching people how to teach people to swim.
absolutely. But it's a dual. We have programs that are just for clients, and this is the stuff we embed with our own work with our clients. But ultimately, the way we teach is that the psychedelic therapist needs to have this model within their own psyche, in their own body, because if you can't do those things for yourself, how
Mm.
can you support other people to swim in the oceans of consciousness? So the program has a dual call to action. It's learning these pillars and lenses um, for yourself as the practitioner first and foremost, and then being able to support that as scaffolding for someone else. And I'll send you some resources for your
No, I love it. I love it.
viewers.
And I know a lot of people will talk about, doing the work, or shadow work, and balancing that self-work as well as self-care in relationship to being a good supportive person, not just integrity for yourself, but in relationship. So how does your program, like, help people to find that wisdom balance between, because I'm sure about, like, projection, transference, counter-inference. We could maybe define some of those terms for the audience, but just the element of, like, I went through this process. This is what helped me. So this is going to help you, type of risk, but also the risk of not doing the work that's necessary, and assuming that I'm already good. Like, I'm confident. I know how to swim. I'm an expert swimmer. And that element of humility in relationship. How do you help create that, or co-create in interdependence, that balance?
Yeah, well, I think it's a long term commitment. So our programs, we hope people stay connected to us long term, because really a psychedelic course for even 10 months, which sounds long, is just the drop in the ocean for this work. So for for us, we're trying to really instill that wisdom is a lifelong aspiration, and you never had it. Very few people have got it. it's it's an aspiration, and you need to be orientating your mind and your body, your soul, spirit towards things that are in line with your values and your ethics. People that, as I said, the Anam Cara, people that can hold up deep levels of friendship and love and reverence, but also the shadow work. And what I found in this field is people often talk about the shadow, and that we need to, as professionals, hold up the shadow, but actually very few professionals stick around for when it gets ugly.
Oh, yeah, I can attest to that.
Yeah.
But it's challenging. There's reasons
It's
why we don't look.
challenging.
There's
Yeah.
reasons.
Well,
They're like, "Oh, wait, I see that. Maybe later." Or, like, or maybe it's not a big deal, or even that I've worked on that, and not realizing that it comes back up in a cycle, or it's a process of healing, right? And I think you're a good testament to this, because you've had your own multiple processes of healing.
mm. And making
And
mistakes, and
yeah, and
there's
making mistakes, which are normal, right? Yeah. What advice would you give someone who's curious about starting work as a facilitator? There's so many programs out there, especially in the States. I don't know what it's like in Australia. I know now you have more and more practitioners, but not as many options in terms of training and education there, from what I understand. Feel free to correct me.
yeah, there's more emerging, which is really exciting. I guess it's complex because at the moment there's still a lot of gatekeeping. There's a lot of great professionals, rightly so, will only work with the people they trust. So it means that there's a very small pool of people that keep getting the same kind of roles. And I guess what we're passionate about through our programs is creating dosing pathways and training for people and kind of breaking down the barriers of gatekeeping and giving more people access and more people opportunities, because what ends up happening is people are so desperate to do this work because it's so meaningful for them that when they get a job, they're not really assessing, is this boss safe? Is this clinic safe for me? Is this aligned with my ethics? What they're focusing in on is, oh my God, I finally get to do a dose session legally.
Right. Right. Or maybe the only person that they find, right, who's willing or that they can afford. Right. There are a lot of barriers in Australia to getting that access. Right. Legal access. We're talking about legal access. But maybe you can define for people, how would you define gatekeeping, and how do you create that balance uh in where's the appropriate, healthy boundary, and where does it become an unhealthy gatekeeping? So maybe you can help by just defining, how do you consider that term, and what do you think about it?
Yeah, I guess I did a PhD in a completely different area, working with the deaf and deafblind community and sign language. And, for them, the whole world is gatekeepers because they're just blocked out from access to sight and sound. And so I guess I can only speak for gatekeeping from me, because there's actually a whole layer of gatekeeping depending on your gender, your race, your disability, so that's kind of a big topic. But I guess for me, technically I'm a gatekeeper in the sense, and I didn't realize that until someone said to me one day, what you're saying matters. Like, you could impact X, Y, and Z by that opinion. And I'm like, oh, wow. Like, I don't think I'm very powerful. And sometimes I think I'm very vulnerable and, completely useless. But to other people, they're like, look at all the roles you're in. And if you have an opinion or you comment on about someone, there's 6 or 7 people in the room that might not hire them, or, and it's like, wow. So I think, and people aren't as forgiving. People aren't as, I might say a comment, but I am very forgiving and I will work with basically anyone, which has been my detriment. But other people aren't. People are very risk averse. People are very clinical. They're very conservative. So I think a gatekeeper is someone who has power over someone else, and that can be through, them having a job, them getting a membership, them being part of a group, them being allowed to come to an event. We have the power to block that, and that's scary, I think, because not a lot of us would probably be thinking about that. And gatekeeping doesn't mean you're a bad person or doing, you have any intentions of excluding anyone, but your very being in the world and sense of power, has an impact on those that are looking up to you, or that you're leading, or that are in your field. So it's definitely something I'm going to be more conscious of. And yeah, I think power is a big one. Like, how are you working with power, being conscious of it.
Yeah, and I love that you also bring up, the sort of invisible gatekeeping, and how even when you're intending to be equitable and inclusive, and or even just shadows of power, but just simple different ability, right? Being ableist, right, in various forms, right? Where this whole society is built for a speaking, visual, hearing, able-bodied, um, neurotypical world, right? And that's not like a conscious gatekeeping, even though there are conscious gatekeeping. A lot of times when I hear gatekeeping in the space, it's people who are blocking access out of trying to create a trust community network, trying to protect community or protect individuals, or to protect from legal harm, depending upon what the situation is, to reduce risk. Um, Although I don't necessarily agree that that does reduce risk, it can often create more opportunities for risk. But what would you say, since you say you are trying to lean into this, what are you recommending to yourself? What are you telling yourself? How are you working on this? Since you talk about, like, doing this sort of work and teaching people to swim by swimming, Well, what are some of the things that you're doing in relationship to this? How do you keep yourself accountable?
That's a good question. I guess, I mean, one of the benefits of having ADHD is that I'm very honest and I'm very open and I overshare. And so I definitely don't, well, I'll pause that. I am less likely to hide. I'm more likely to confront and talk and share. And for some, that's confronting and also uncomfortable. So I'm trying to find that line of how to be a professional and someone with lived experience in this space and wear all those hats and know that I have my own neurodiversity, and that can means I can miss other people's. I can actually clash a little bit with people with autism um, because of my ADHD. It has a unique quality that for some people is like, whoa, too much, slow down. You're all over the place at times. So I think letting people know about my neurodiversity, letting people know that I'm open to feedback. I tell all my students, I actually have a pack for my students saying, this is how my brain works. These are my quirks. Please assume it's not you. Assume it's me first. We're learning and I want you to feel safe to pull me up and say, this isn't clear or you need to slow down. So it's actually bringing a bit of humor and a bit of fun and a bit of playfulness to things that could be really offensive and serious, and giving people the permission to challenge me and permission to, illuminate my quirks. And, for me, big part of Anam Cara is creating deep, long-term mentoring pathways. So investing in students and investing in relationships. And, I do hope I get that back, and I am getting that back in certain ways now from certain people in the field, which it took a little bit for me to find my feet of like,
Yeah. Well, no, and I appreciate that. I think that there's an element, I mean, for everyone to find their space, but as someone who also self-identifies as being neurodiverse and on the spectrum, ADHD, however we want to say it, I really appreciate the sort of unmasking, as we would say, that you're doing by in relationship by sharing that aspect of yourself, by being willing to own those challenges in communication and opening up the lines of communication and encouraging your students to even call you into a relationship when those challenges arise. Because and I would definitely agree with you that there are certainly times where what the conflict that's happening is a conflict based on a misunderstanding due to different abilities. Getting back to this
different
question of
ways of just different lenses and ways of being in the world. And I think in this field, we don't have enough compassion for practitioners, particularly the not-for-profit sector. I'm a clinician and I have paid work, of course, but I do, I don't know, 15, 20 hours a week, unpaid work at least. I've got young kids, and there's many of us like that, through example, EPIC, Australian Psychedelic Society. It's like, yeah, there's not a lot of, I would say, support, nourishment, really just really acknowledging we get it right. We do it pretty well for our clients, but I think for the actual volunteers in this space and pioneers and people who are doing something for the first time that's never been done before, need a bit more kind of compassion and like, are you okay? Okay, you're dysregulated and you're being weird. Do you need anything? Like, can I get you a cup of tea?
I love that. Because I think we talk about being trauma informed in our space, and as someone who definitely is an expert at both personally and professionally, I think definitely one of the unique challenges, since you're mentioning that earlier about the unique challenges of this space, is the fact that a lot of the people we are interacting with, including ourselves, have a lived experience of trauma, and trauma triggers come up. What are some of the resources or supports that you found helpful for you as you navigate through this space, both as, a person with that lived experience and as you live that in relationship?
I mean, this isn't everyone's way of being in the world, but what I'm trying to do for myself now is only really like engage in systems where it can hold pretty big shadow. If I'm working in a very regulated service where if anyone makes a mistake, then there's going to be shame, or there's going to be like, oh my God, how do we cover this up? How do we get rid of this person? Like that just is cancer for me now. So I guess a big part of my role at AMAP is creating a culture where, mistakes and ethical issues are going to happen, and people need to feel, that they can connect with us and, really go there, because what you find with most supervision or regulatory spaces, there's a limit, there's a cap of what people can share out of fear. And this is where the shadow of psychedelics will thrive. And this is where people will, not get help. And so, yeah, I'm very big at that no shame culture. It doesn't mean no responsibility. And there's a big difference between, criminal, predatory behavior, but still, those people still deserve to get support and to be, supported to take responsibility. But yeah, I've watched over the years how quickly groups can turn and how quickly the gatekeepers with the best intentions can just turn on people. And I've been one of those people when I entered a very unhealthy organization, no one would talk to me. No, like people were like, I was blacklisted. And I look back now and go, oh, I was very vulnerable and I needed help. I needed someone to say, you're involved with the wrong people and this is out of line, but I'm here for you. Even when you leave, I'm here for you. What you need. And I've had the luck, the fortune of going through that experience and having that same process happen where I've left and new people have come in and they've had the same experience. And I've been able to say to them, I won't be associated with those spaces. I can't be associated with you professionally because you're in that space, but I'm here for you at any point. Any point you want to talk about it, or if you leave, I'm here and I get it,
Yeah, and I love that 'cause you're putting the priority on the person and on the relationship and on creating that support mechanism that's there, independent of the choices that they're making as a person.
You can still have boundaries. You can still send the same message of this is not okay and this is serious. But that person can know that you're like, there's potential there, for advice or support if they choose to step into that. Right.
And I love that you're also giving examples of other things that happen in the space that can cause harm because people think they're setting healthy boundaries by blacklisting, by removing people from a community, but they're not still holding space for their mental health or their well-being.
Or talking to them about it. A lot of
Or
it was
communicating, right? Like just closing the doors, cancel culture type of orientation where you've crossed a line that you haven't communicated, you haven't talked to me, and now I'm out and I don't fully understand why.
so, yeah, very big about the tough conversations, the going to these uncomfortable places. And yeah, it's all of this has really tested compassion for me because it's, as has my early childhood experiences of trauma, because it's easy to have compassion for colleagues that you get along with and, systems that are pretty good. But it's like when you are face to face with something pretty ugly, how deep is your compassion? So I guess what I would say for people starting out in this field is have a good look at how deep your compassion has been tested, because that's the level of how you're going to be able to meet some clients and some systems. And if it hasn't been tested, and because I think there are limits for therapy and for how deep you can support people, if you're only able to hold, compassion at quite a superficial level or at a level that's comfortable, like living from a very embodied space of ethics and depth requires like for me, compassion that is like almost supernatural, where you have to, the space that you have to hold. And that doesn't mean compromising your own safety or your boundaries. It's much more rich than that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and as, some of what we talked about earlier, like, and I love, compassion is so key for me personally. So I really resonate with what you're sharing. And that also that aspect of compassion for yourself, right, in equal measure, right? That sometimes what I've noticed, at least, and it sounds like you also, right, that there's also a tendency for some people to overgive, thinking that it's compassion when it's actually causing harm to themselves
Absolutely.
in the
Or overshare.
process,
Yeah. Which I tend to do all the time. Yeah.
No, I mean,
But I
like,
would rather.
like, we could have a whole discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, what counts as oversharing, because, like, I mean, I think I'll say I like this about, being on the spectrum and that little tendency towards oversharing or openness, right? To put it in a positive light, that at least there's an understanding and a willingness to have those conversations,
Mm-hmm.
and that we're less likely perhaps to go into that space where it's nice, but not that, all, everyone's different, right? I have my moments where I'm in shutdown too, right? There's times, right? And that wave and flow, but I love the compassion, because compassion will help serve for all the things that you mentioned today, for swim, as a practitioner, for yourself, whether you've experienced harm or traumas in your past, whether you're working with clients, whether you're a journeyer who's curious about the work. So I just want to say thank you for your compassion, your
And
heart
yours.
space, and for your friendship and relationship with this work. Seeing people like you who continue to show up in different ways, even when there are breakdowns of communication, and even when maybe the repair can't happen, but you still are trying to show up with compassion towards yourself and others. So thank you for this conversation,
Thank you. It's been
Lani,
fun.
and so much. Yeah, thank you.
For everything you do and for being, that joyous bundle of laughter that you are. We've been in meetings sometimes when I think other people have been like serious and quiet, and your laughter's been like, I'm not going to say inappropriate, but it's like it stands out, and I'm like, yes, because like, why not laugh right now for no reason?
Laugh or cry, like,
Yeah.
well, I lean towards laughter,
I
maybe
love it.
that's a laughter overshare. Thank you for
It's
that. I really
perfect.
appreciate you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you
Thank
have
you.
a beautiful rest of your day, and it's my evening as we meet between worlds. And thank you so much, Lani. There's so much I enjoy about talking with Dr. Lani, and it's not just because we both are passionate about having good practice to prevent harm and abuse in this space, but also just truly the willingness and the bravery to be able to look at one's own shadows, and sometimes, you have a practice that is really very much in the shadow space. Her work very much is. And I think one thing that's hard to explain to people who don't work with survivors of different sort, or who are not a survivor, and I should disclose that I also identify as being a survivor, that not just the unique compassion you need and the skills you need, and what it means to be trauma informed, but the real time it takes to have these transformations and healing. And healing is a process. It's never a one and done. And you can hear that in the story, in this conversation. And I hope this helps to ground people who are thinking about exploring this work, not just in the fact that it really does take time to heal, and but that also that optimistic, that hope piece, that you can turn that work into things that also help and uplift others. And I hope that you're uplifted from hearing this episode. And do make sure you're well-resourced. One thing I want to make sure I emphasize at the end of this episode is to make sure, again, that you are well supported and that you receive the support that you need wherever you are in your journey. If you have had a challenging experience, or if you have had a history of traumatic experiences, not only be gentle and take care of yourself, but please get the support and resources that you need. You've heard about Shine, who does some peer-based survivor support in the psychedelic space, and Nest, harm reduction. Depending upon where you are in the world and what you need, please don't hesitate to find counselors and professionally trained therapists who can help support your needs. And I hope this episode helps to show that healing is possible. And though we're never at 100% per se, the shadows are still the shadows. You just integrate them. So sending you so much love and support, and thank you for holding a brave space for yourself for this conversation. Thank you for joining me on Psychedelic Source. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and share with others in our community. And if you're a psychedelic practitioner, therapist, or coach looking to identify blind spots in your practice or determine next steps for moving it forward, take the first step by visiting psychedelicsourcepodcast.com. Until next time, remember, start low, go slow, and stay connected to your source.